layers, it spans disciplines, it kind of links concepts together, it helps us to integrate it, and I personally find it rather fun, and a lot of students do too. So I'm going to run you through a PowerPoint here that gives some examples of the wheels of place and time that I work with, but also addresses some of the uses of art when we're talking in terms of art and science integration. I've thought about some of those links and how some artists have actually understood through their art and their illustration, like Van Gogh, understood some of the theories of turbulence they're looking at with, how he painted the Starry Night. And, it can be ways that we intuitively understand some scientific concepts, some concepts in physics, some cultural concepts, and put those down when maybe we don't have the words for those. Maybe we don't quite have all the facts and knowledge, but it's kind of a gut level, intuitive understanding. So I think art and science, I think that they have kind of a symbiotic relationship. And they can, art can just convey that kind of information that you just can't capture sometimes with words. So this is kind of the typical thinking. You've got all that, dry left brain stuff, all the linear stuff, all the facts, and then the right brain. This is actually a Mercedes-Benz ad. And I use this, though, to just make the point that, those are kind of exaggerations. When I did a lot of research into brain-based learning, I understood that this is kind of stereotypical. There's a lot of crossover between the right and left brain, and it's important to honor both, because without developing that creativity, without developing those ways to visually communicate what we understand and to kind of nurture that innovation and ability to think outside the box, we don't get very far with our scientific knowledge. It kind of stays as knowledge, and we've got to use that knowledge to innovate and come up with some better systems. So this is probably my most boring looking slide. But I was really intrigued with how we learn things and how basically remember things, and that there are different types of memory. This might not be big news to a lot of you who are educators, but thinking about what pathways to memory art-based strategies use, what pathways to memory experiences actually getting out in nature, talking to people about things, what do those engage? Semantic memory is what we think of as knowledge, facts, figures, information. Most of that knowledge comes to us through reading or through auditory means. It's also the weakest link to memory. That's the stuff that we most easily forget. But for some reason, because it's really the delivery method, look, I'm standing in front of you all talking right now, the delivery method is much more efficient for mass education, so that's what we use. But there's also other types of memory, and drawing engages that procedural memory where you're using a bodily process, it's a kinesthetic process, you're mapping things out, you're using your spatial intelligence. That's another mode. Not that it's necessarily better or worse, but the more modes to memory that you employ in your educational techniques, the more chance you have that that knowledge and that understanding is going to stick. Episodic memory is tied to a place or circumstances. So if you go out and you draw in a special place, or you use that as part of your place-based experience with your kids, chances are they'll remember that better. And there's a lot of visual learners about, I think I put that on my handout, but they say 80% of the information comes to us through the visual pathways, even reading. So if you read, the trees were blue, or the trees were green, the sky was blue, you've got to form an image of your mind to even understand what you were reading. So it's really, really important. It also ties into the flow learning cycle. This is from Coyote's Guide to Connecting with Nature, which is a really awesome e-book. But it's a natural cycle of learning where you have to integrate and you have to reflect. You have to have time to gather and share. It can't all be just this active learning. So by the time that you get to the point of integrating and sharing, using a visual strategy is really a very good way to give students the chance to map that out, make their own mind map. Besides, that's just a really cool graphic with all those rocks. I loved that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a sucker for the visual. So visual information, this is something that a first grade kid did, I believe. I never met the kid, but legend has it that the child actually had some cognitive delays, some problems with how their usual performance in school. The teachers were really blown away at how much that kid was able to articulate about what he knew about the life cycle of that oak tree just with those pictures. So, you have the leaves falling off, you have the leaves coming on, you have the leaves turning color. I just love that one. What did I do? So when we're communicating our experiences in nature, and that's really what art is, why do we draw pictures? It's to show somebody. It's for ourselves, but ultimately it's to show somebody something that we saw or to communicate an experience. I love this quote by Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring and was a major educator and environmentalist. And one way to open your eyes is to ask yourself, what if I had never seen this before? And what if I knew I would never see it again? So it really kind of forces you to hone in on that present moment and think about what you're seeing and what you want to capture. And art can also be a way to get that sense of place. We hear so much about that as environmental educators, how we really want kids to bond to a place and get a sense of that. Well, like Susan Lemieux was talking about this morning, just being in a place, spending time in a place is so important. Well, sometimes it's hard to just sit there, but if you're engaged with something and you're doing a painting, you're doing a drawing, it forces you to observe and engage more deeply with it. And I think that there's a lot of ways that visual components can fit right into what we want to do with this. When we look at like the talking circle and sharing climate change projects, sharing results, doing a visual element to that really helps us to have a piece that we can show other people. That seems kind of elementary. Investigating the place-based evidence of the climate change and the culture. Well, the first step in anything is being able to engage with it deeply and to observe, what's going on. So having people sit down and do a little bit of artwork, looking at something, drawing something, I think that invites a deeper level of observation and builds those skills that we need as scientists, as we need as artists, as we just need as people. And then with culture and science agreeing, sometimes art can help us to integrate those two concepts, in a new way and find, kind of that middle ground to understand something. And then taking action on climate change, I like to think actually of art as activism, okay? A lot of the things that we've done with preservation of wilderness have really been because of images that we see. One of the most outstanding examples that I think of is like, Ansel Adams and his photography. If you think of, there was Thomas Moran in Yellowstone, who people wouldn't really believe that the descriptions, maybe some of the scientific information they were getting about these places, Was it even accurate? Was it believable? Until you see something, it's just an abstract concept. So I think that having those images was really instrumental in places getting preserved, because it gets you at a certain level. So in environmental ed, we're just taught this, like a mantra, first you start with that level of awareness, and that leads, and I have to still read this off because I didn't remember and that leads to knowledge, and that leads to attitude, and that leads to skills, and that leads to participation. And it's all, a wonderful linear theory. But what they find a lot of times in environmental education is that we're not getting people on that level of activism, of participation, of caring, despite the fact that scientifically we probably know more about what's going on this planet and how things work than ever before in the history of mankind. So why aren't people getting, more engaged? Why aren't they caring? I think that this quote by John Burroughs, that knowledge without love will not stick, but if love comes first, knowledge is sure to follow. We're not talking about, the kind of love where you're hugging trees and all that, but it's more of a connection to me. It's more of getting at that level of caring about a place and engaging with it that leads to all of these other things. But you can't skip that. I just do not think you can skip that. And that's a lot of times the attitudes that we form when we're little kids. So that was I used those images from Copper Falls to put on a poster for a little, waterfall tour. So now we get to these handy dandy Wheels of Time plays, and this is where I start feeling like I'm in an infomercial. But these were developed by Ann Forbes down in Madison, who was connected with the DNR and also with Edgewood College. But they help you to think in a holistic way. So we've been talking a lot today about time that came before and time ahead, and the present time, and all of these different changes and phenology and species, and how do you take all that and integrate it in a way that your mind can grasp that? That's tricky. So putting things in a circle so that we're thinking of time as a circle and not as separate events, when maybe we're thinking about the ecosystem, the species we see, a life cycle as a circle, and getting that all in one snapshot is helpful for understanding. Besides, they look kind of cool. So to show you how these work, these are blank templates, and it's really simple. Like, I didn't invent the circle. Nobody else invented the circle. But it's just a way of mapping these out. So these are divided up by months. There's one in this kit that is divided up, also goes through the moon phases. There's lots of them where you can think about how you would want to break down an experience by time, by place, by different cycles, and we're going to practice with that. So these are some different ones, like the Wheel of the Year, some uses, and we're going to go through an example that a teacher did with this to help illuminate that a bit. So you can, do phenology, you can do a life cycle of a species, life cycle of yourself, have students go out to a spot, and these are all on the website that I have with this, so you don't have to worry about writing these down. And you can also keep these as a class project, so let's say you're going out in nature, you're studying something every month. Kids could put all of their observations together in one big wheel and compare how one is seeing things. Wheel of a Lifetime. Now, I have not done these yet. I have not seen anybody do them, but I think they could be very, very cool. Or like when you're talking with elders, and putting about their life, about their experiences. The wheel and quarters, we're gonna work with those today when we go out, because those are great for a snapshot of like one place in time. I've used them where you start with the center, maybe it could be your place, maybe it could be a central theme, and you could go from, a spot and what do you see in 4 different directions, or what do you experience through 4 different senses. Do 4 seasons of the year like I did with the oak wheel. We could also do that with other plants. And then that ties in with the Ojibwe lifeways that are on the GWAS site. And a blank wheel. Well, you can do anything with a blank wheel. But some of the things that you can think about are, something that has a central theme, a central place, like a watershed. You've got the lake, and then, what are the things that relate around it. And then the handy dandy 13 moons of the year wheel, which I did not put the moon names in. I just have them blank because they vary so much region by region. In the handout that I gave you, I just have a list from this region. And one teacher last year tied this into like 13 moons on Turtle's Back, and read the story, did some drawing. And then also you can keep a moon journal, throughout the year. And that is based on this cool thing that turtles have 13 little sections on their shells, but I didn't know about the 28 little small sections. That was news to me. I thought that was really, really cool. So this is how we put together the tree wheel. You just, we combine some observations and some recollections, some research. You could do this with any species, really. So we're doing some seasonal research on what happened with this oak tree. And then, voila, it just turned into that with just some effort and work and stuff. And these are some other ones. This was part of a witness tree exhibition that was down in Madison. But I could see this being really cool to do with like the maple, do with the birch, and tie that into what are some of the different cultural practices that go along with that. This one I think is just crazy. She did the soil, the snow. It was really big. She had a lot of time. And these are some of the kid tree journals. They would pick their tree and draw it throughout the year. But again, look at, some of the things they're understanding of that tree by looking at it. And there's all different ways to record on these things. You can write, you can sketch, you can trace, you can take photos, do a collage, you can do a mixture of a whole bunch of things. So this is some that people did with text. That person is like a professional calligrapher. I wouldn't even recommend it. But that was really a pretty phenomenal one. But those other ones are just poems about a place. So you can tie them in with literature. Some kids prefer to write more than they prefer to draw, and that's really cool too. As long as they do it in a circular or some sort of artful form. Do it anyway. These are sketching of some life cycles, like that's the Canadian goose, or Canada goose. Which one is it?
Canada.
Thank you. I always get that wrong. They're from Canada. And this is some of photos, the Wingra watershed. They use to kind of integrate their experiences there. This is one that they did in where the center was the theme, the overall theme. The outside rim were some topics that they covered throughout the year. And then the images in the middle part of the wheel were kind of how does one integrate with the other. And this was, so here's the earth, here's different systems, and just different aspects of it. I love this one. This is the food system. Oh my God, it's a CAFO. Okay. No. But, it shows, some awareness between what we're getting on our table and what's happening in our environment. And these are actually from some teachers in a past institute of their experience through a workshop, a week-long workshop, and different things that they saw. Thought this one was really kind of cool. I think she was an art teacher. And so Dorothy Jeanette, she's a science teacher in Stevens Point. She also works with CISA 5. She went through this, I believe, last year. First year? Okay. And she did a wild rice life cycle. And this is a PowerPoint that she used to introduce it. And I'm willing to share this with anybody, this part of it, if you want to do something with the wild rice. Thing in front of them is like what they're supposed to do, how is it supposed to look. Some people get hung up on perfection, especially with art. We're not probably as confident in that skill area as we should be because it's just not emphasized. It's like if you don't get art or you decide you're not good at it by about 5th, 6th grade, nobody really cares, It's like, oh, okay, well, that's okay, you're just not good at it, and you can take art appreciation, and you don't really have to learn and participate in it. And I wanted algebra appreciation myself, but no, nothing like that. But showing, just emphasizing the process over the final product, and showing examples, and encouraging kids to collaborate, to share those wheels with others. That goes back to one of the points on the G-Well, on the talking circle, I believe it was. And if you're going to go outside and make observations, of course you should have some preparation. Don't just take kids out there and expect them to know what to do. This is pretty elementary, but giving them some structure, maybe picking out a particular wheel you're going to work with, particular place, a purpose. It gives enough of a framework, I think, that they can concentrate on. And personal space, so choosing a spot, ideally, that they can go to, that they can visit, over the course of a year is really kind of a cool thing to do with these. I remember in 6th grade science in McFarland, and this is why I put down be patient, is that the first class period, it took like all 45 minutes just to talk a little bit about what we're doing and choose a spot right out there. We didn't get to journaling, and it was really, honestly, it was like letting monkeys out of the zoo. They were not ready, and I say that in the kindest way. They were lovely children, but they just were not used to that regular experience of going outside for science. So it just took all class period, and some of the teachers were, of course, like, well, how does this actually work? And I could tell they were a little doubtful. But it was funny, by May, I was out pulling garlic mustard, because that's what you do down there. You pull out invasive species. And I saw this whole bunch of kids coming over the hill, and they had their clipboards, and they had their wheels, and they went to their spots. And they had, really gotten into it after a while and taken some ownership over it. So then, and don't expect them to spend a whole lot of time if you're doing outside observations. And have your little kids ready. I've got kits, but if they just have something they can grab, that makes it easy. And then it's really important too to meet at the end. Maybe not at the end of the class period, but at some point on the project, and share and compare observations, not only with their other classmates, but maybe put these up somewhere. So if you see even, they've got this holistic view of what they learned, even seeing, what's somebody else's viewpoint on this? How do all of our, holistic viewpoints all work together? Okay, wait. It's the question slide.